We want you to go around the country and we want you to buy dental practices for us. It's like, no kidding. How in the hell do you buy a dental practice? And I kid you not, that was my response. And you know, the funny thing about Pat, this is literally what he did. He laughed, he chuckled. He was like, well, you're a smart guy. I'm sure you'll figure it out. And the guy literally got up out of his chair and walked out.
If you're comfortable, you're not growing. Welcome to another episode of Dental Marketing Theory. I'm your host, Gary Bird, and today we got a doozy for you. We have Brian Manns, who he actually goes through his whole journey. He's going to blow your mind. He's not only started in the marketing department at Heartland, but he moved to acquisitions, then started a DSO, grew it to over 200 million, sold it, and then now he helps other dentists, dental practices like yours, find the right kind of DSOs to sell to. You are going to be blown away. It's a little bit of a longer episode today, but I think you're going to enjoy it. Stay tuned. So why don't you share with us how you got started in the dental industry?
Yeah, Gary, it's kind of a crazy story. Even to this day, I still ask myself that question. You know, I have a degree from Eastern Illinois University with a sports management degree, which absolutely has nothing to do with dental, and you know, a minor in exercise physiology. And, you know, when I got out of college, I had a sales job. I got a regular sales job in the AR industry. And with that job, I ended up calling on a lot of dental practices throughout, you know, Illinois, Indiana, Missouri, et cetera. And, you know, I ended up meeting this girl in Robinson, Illinois, who, you know, she had a 3-year-old kid, and you know, I dated her for a while, and things started to get serious, and so I started going to like these t-ball games, these basketball games with her 3-year-old son, and you know, one thing led to another, and you know, people started asking me like, "Who are you? What do you do?" And I would tell them, I'm like, "Yeah, so I work for this company, Tech Collect, and you know, this is what I do." And it was almost like these people would kind of drop and try to get away from me, which was crazy. I was like, why are these people trying to dodge me? And come to find out, you know, my company was calling on them because they weren't paying their bills in town. So once I kind of figured out like, hey, I'm being branded as this collections guy, right? I didn't want to be that in my life. And so I started to ask questions like, you know, what do I want to do? Where am I going to go with this? Well, when I was building that business, Gary, I had learned a lot about marketing and getting people to call me. And I absolutely hate picking up the phone and cold calling people. So I spent a ton of my time, you know, trying to figure out, how do I get these people to call me? And I got pretty good at it. And so there was this job opportunity from Heartland Dental, who, by the way, their corporate office is only about an hour from my house. They had this.
And roughly, how big were they at this time? So right now they're like 2,000 practices or something crazy like that. How big were they at that time?
Yeah. So when I came into Heartland, they probably had about 250 locations, and I think they were in maybe 15.
They were 90% smaller.
Oh yeah. Yeah. They were still big, but they were a lot smaller than they are today, obviously. But they had this marketing consultant position available. And I said to myself, well, you know, I didn't go to school to be a marketing consultant. But I feel like I know quite a bit about marketing now. And so, you know, I kind of took the job interview, and I didn't really have a lot of expectations. As a matter of fact, I didn't think I was going to go anywhere. And after my first interview, I walked out of there thinking, oh my gosh, you know, I'm applying for the wrong job. I feel like I should be going for the VP of marketing. I felt like during the interview process, the questions I was asking, I felt like were going over everybody's head. Like they didn't know what I was talking about. And so that's when I had that epiphany, man, I'm really applying for the wrong job. And so immediately I decided, you know what, I'm going to take this job. I'm not even going to negotiate pay. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to get my foot in the door in this company. And then my immediate goal after that is going to be to rise to the top. And that was it. I mean, it's pretty arrogant. And by the way, back then I was extremely arrogant. So I literally had these thoughts like, yeah, I'm just going to run by all these people. Well, so that's what I did. I took the job. As a matter of fact, it was about a $15,000 pay cut from the job I was currently doing. And my mission in life was just to get in and go. And now here's where it got interesting, right? So I get in there, I get the job, and they paid me, I think it was like $31,000 a year.
Hey, sorry to disrupt the show, but I just have a quick commercial for you. We are going to be hosting 4 events over the next 12 months, and we're doing a little bit of everything for everybody. We have something around Full Arch. We have something for those that manage marketing. We have something for those that want to scale their practice at Dykema. And then also we have something next year that's for everybody in your practice to learn business skills and to really maximize the opportunities for you to grow your offices. You're not going to want to miss these. Visit smcnational.com/events. These are going to be the premier events that you're going to want to go to make sure that you're getting the tactical skills that you need to continue to grow the way that you want, because at SMC, we're all about growing. What year was this?
This was 2010. So at the end of 2010, it's a $30,000 a year job. I had a crazy amount of student loan debt. So by the time I paid my student loans off, I had about $5 left in my bank every week. So it was one of those situations. And I get in and I'm thinking, man, I'm just going to go. Well, I had never been in a corporate environment before. I'd never really had to work with people. And so what I learned from that experience was I was a bull in a china shop. And man, did I get stopped dead in my tracks. So, I mean, I was met with so much resistance and so much pushback, and people were
like, walk through this with people. Cause I think there's a lot of people who listen who maybe have smaller companies that don't understand what you mean by that.
Yeah. So, I had the personality type that if you said something that I didn't agree with back then, it wouldn't be beyond me to say, wow, that's pretty stupid. I mean, I would just flat out tell them, I don't agree with that. And I think that's stupid. And
so you weren't approaching it from a level of curiosity of like, hey, why do you feel that way? Could you explain more to me? You were just like, you're dumb.
Zero leadership skills in 2010. That's where I was at. Okay.
Got it.
And
awesome.
When you have a personality like that, people love to tell you about your personality. So I'll get to my personality assessment later on in this interview. But so I had to figure out another way. And somebody recommended this book by Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I read that book probably 5 times. And I kept thinking, all these things sound good. They make sense. But man, this is going to take forever to do these strategies, right? You have to plant seeds, get people to, come up with the idea on their own instead of telling them what the answer is. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be forever. Well, as it turns out, that's a pretty good strategy. And it started allowing me to move forward in my position there. Okay. So things started to go well, and I started to do well in my job, and I started getting less resistance, and I started to excel in that position. And I did that marketing consulting job for probably, a little less than 2 years. And my entire goal still was, hey, I'm going to the top. And one day I get a knock on my cubicle, and I was told that Pat Bauer wanted to see me in his office. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Pat Bauer at the time, he was the president. He's now the CEO of Heartland. Does he even know who I am? How does he even know who I am? And what the heck does he want with me? And so I met with him, and I was terrified. I go in this giant office and I sit down, and he was like, well, you've been recommended by a lot of doctors and a lot of our administrators to join our acquisitions team or our affiliations team. I was like, really? What the heck is that? And he was like, well, we want you to go around the country, and we want you to buy dental practices for us. It's like, no kidding, Pat, how in the do you buy a dental practice? And I kid you not, that was my response. And the funny thing about Pat, this is literally what he did. He laughed, he chuckled. He was like, well, you're a smart guy. I'm sure you'll figure it out. And the guy literally got up out of his chair and walked out. And that was the end of the interview. And so on one hand, I'm sitting here like, well, I'm pretty sure I just got promoted, so I'm excited. But on the flip side, it was like being promoted to chemical engineer. I had no idea how to do this job. Didn't even know had no idea how to buy a dental practice. Okay. That's where I was at, ground zero, terrified. And so then I was thinking, well, man, maybe I shouldn't do it because I don't know how to do it. But then I was like, well, if I don't do it, then I'm going to be the guy that passed down an opportunity from the president. I may never get this opportunity again. So I got to do it. So I did. And I spent the next 6 months at the corporate office in Effingham, Illinois, bugging the hell out of everybody. Who are you? What do you do? How do you affect acquisitions? How can I help you in acquisitions? What do I need to know to be good at my job? And I did that to everybody. And I was a pest, by the way. And because everybody's busy. And so my job, I was literally told to go interrupt people and learn from them. And so I did. And I think it upset a few people, but that was the way I was able to get my education. And so after about 6 months of doing that, I'll never forget, it was in 2012, October of 2012, my life changed forever. So I turned 30, I married my wife, and I was given a territory at Heartland, my first territory, okay? And I'll never forget, they came to me and they were like, now look, Brian, don't freak out. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to list, we're going to put your name on the website and we're going to list 26 states under your name, but don't freak out because here's the thing. We're only in 3 of those states, but we want the world to know that we're eventually going to go to those other 23 states, right? And I said, hey, you're the boss. You do whatever you want. That sounds great to me. And what happened was actually the greatest thing that's ever happened to me was that, because as soon as we did that, I started getting calls from highly successful dentists in all 26 of those states and deals we couldn't ignore, $2 million revenue, heavy PPO practice, no Medicaid, easy to recruit to markets, EBITDA margins, 20% or above. It's like, man, you can't walk away from that. So I became this human ping pong ball, Gary. And I was on a plane 2 or 3 times a week and I was bouncing. A normal week for me was, I fly out of Indianapolis, bounce over to Columbia, South Carolina, kick over to, Fort Smith, Arkansas, and then back up to Dayton, Ohio, and then back to Indianapolis, and then rinse and repeat. And it was really a cool experience. And the thing that really, above all else, the coolest part about it was I worked in every type of market. And what I found was that it didn't matter where I went. It didn't matter what market I was in. It didn't matter what part of the country. It didn't matter. These successful dentists, they had a series of fears, frustrations, and challenges that were all similar across the board. And what I found was I was having the same conversation every single day. And I kept thinking to myself, man, if I had a bag full of cash and could do this myself, I feel like I could give these guys exactly what they want and really create a win-win deal. Now, I'm not knocking Heartland at all. I think Heartland is amazing at what they do, but they were so big at the time that it was hard for them to be as flexible on deals. So there were certain things that had to change. Although I would say Heartland in general is pretty flexible with their deals, but I just remember thinking, man, I'm going to have to put these guys into somewhat of a box.
So what was like what was the biggest gap? Like, where did you realize like, okay, Heartland's amazing at what they do, but there's a gap there of I can do something else over here?
Yeah. So that's a really good question. And we could probably talk about that for an hour, but there's just little things like, Heartland believes that every new patient should go through the hygiene schedule first, right? And there's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of good things that come from that, by the way. On one hand, I agree with that. But on another hand, I'm coming from the non-dental industry, coming into the dental industry, and I'm hearing that. All these smart people at Heartland are saying that. So I'm like, oh, that makes sense. But then I started analyzing these practices and what I was finding was about 50% of them ran all their new patients through the hygiene schedule first. And the other 50% were running everybody through the doctor schedule. And they both had $1 million plus practices with a strong EBITDA margin. And so I just started asking what I think are intelligent questions like, well, why is one better than the other? Right? Why is one better than the other if I'm seeing across the board, both are successful? Okay.
Yeah. Is there something that I'm missing? Is it the patients are happier that way, or the doctor's happier that way? Is it better for the team? What is it easier for marketing? Like why is this the way to do it? And I totally get that.
That's right. And so over time, after seeing that and sitting down and talking to these, because you talk to a doctor who runs everybody through their doctor schedule first, they are very passionate about that's the way to do it.
Yep.
And as a
100%,
sales guy, what I always think is whenever you get into a situation like that, then you default to what the salesperson is most comfortable with. So if the doctor, and in this case, the doctor is the salesperson, right? So if the doctor is most comfortable with the patients coming through his or her schedule first, then that's the right answer, right? Because that doctor is going to have a certain level of confidence when that happens, which is then going to elevate the case acceptance, and there's going to be a lot of good things that happen from that, right?
100%. Yeah. And what I've seen on the marketing side, because I've seen the same exact thing. We've had this conversation over and over and over again with doctors, because a lot of people ask us, what do you guys think? And for me, it depends what you're optimizing for. If you're optimizing for treatment, send them straight to the doctor, because the doctor is going to find the treatment and they're going to dig it out and you're going to get treatment done. If you're optimizing for retention, then you need to start with hygiene and send the patients through hygiene. And sometimes you want to do both. Sometimes you want to get the emergencies in right away and triage them with the doctor and then punt back to hygiene. And then other time run to hygiene. But it depends, right? What are you optimizing for? So I love that. I love that train of thought. So how did this parlay into what you're doing now? And could you tell us a little bit about that part of the journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to kind of finish up with the Heartland journey, I was not looking to leave. I happen to have a lot of respect for Pat Bauer, Rick Workman. As a matter of fact, Rick Workman, I think he gets a lot of negativity thrown his way. But if you've ever been around that guy, he's one of the most amazing people to be around. Just watching him make decisions is one of the coolest things I've ever witnessed in my life. And Pat Bauer.
Why is that?
Yeah. So Dr. Workman, and I've sat in many meetings with him on the development side. And what he does really well is he will get input from his team around the room. And he'll say, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And then once he gets all that input, he just kind of looks up for a second and then bam, this is what we're doing. And he has no more questions and that's it. And I've seen people kind of push back at him when he does that. And that's it. This is what we're doing. Now go do it. But he gives everybody the opportunity to speak their mind first. He weighs the pros and cons, makes the decision. He does not hesitate. And which I think, after seeing that, I've worked with a lot of other highly successful people. And I think that one thing that sets Rick apart from everybody else is he does not hesitate once he makes that decision. Some people, they'll be like, well, is that really the right decision? And they'll start hesitating and asking themselves questions. Dr. Workman does not do that. He makes his mind up and bam, we're going. This is what we're doing. And I think that was really cool to see that. But anyway, with that being said, so I really enjoyed working there. And as a matter of fact, I was flying around in the private jet going on deals. So, with my wife on several deals. So that was really cool. And I wasn't looking to leave, but then I got a call from these guys out of Chicago, this private equity company, Tyree D'Angelo and Partners, back in 2014. And they basically said, hey, look, we're looking to start a brand new DSO. And what we want to do is bring in experts from all the major DSOs. And what we want to do is try to replicate the successes of each of those companies, but eliminate the failures. And I said, that makes sense, guys. But let me ask you something. How in the hell am I going to tell my blue collar wife that I'm leaving $1 billion company to join a startup out of Chicago? How am I going to have that conversation? And Gary, they didn't have an answer for that. So that call ended right there. I would say maybe 2 or 3 months later, I got another call from them and they said, hey, Brian, we've assembled a team, a potential team of partners. We're having a meeting in Chicago. We'd love for you to come up and meet with everybody, see what you think. Worst case scenario, you get free food and free drinks and get to meet some cool people and then nothing. And then you can go home. Or maybe you'll like what we have to say and you'll join us. So I went on the trip, made the 4.5 hour trip to Chicago. got up there, really wasn't expecting much. By the way, before I made that trip, the week before, I just closed about $8 million in revenue for Heartland. So had a pretty good month for them. And I get up there, and there's all these people from all these different DSOs that I've never met. And we started talking about, if we had a bag full of cash, how we would build our own DSO. And it was crazy because I have a hard time agreeing with, a few people at a dinner table, right? But here I'm surrounded by 8 or 9 people. We're all saying the same thing, singing the same song. And I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, this will actually work. We could do this. And after meeting with them, that's where my comfort level got extremely high. And I made a decision on the spot. Boom, I'm doing it. And
oh, wow.
I didn't even consult my wife.
So how did they answer the wife question?
So they didn't. It was really meeting with the partners and seeing like how everybody felt about how to appropriately build a DSO that ultimately gave me confidence.
So it was more, so this was not a money play short term. This was we aligned values wise.
Yeah.
And that's going to end up in something really good in the long term.
That's right. So we were on the same board from a vision standpoint, how to build this DSO, how to take care of our doctors. And so that drive home, I had this vision. I'm thinking, I'm going to go home, I'm going to kick the door down, and there's going to be fireworks everywhere. And, it's going to be amazing, right? My wife's just going to think I'm a hero. And as soon as I get home, I tell her the story, and she's like, wow, you're an idiot. And I've never heard so many negative things come out of somebody's mouth in my life. And I'm sitting here and I'm trying, I feel like I'm a pretty good sales guy. I could not get her to see the upside of this deal. She gets my mother and my grandmother to all revolt against me. Okay.
Oh, man.
This is the middle of September of 2014. I said, look, ladies, I've made up my mind. I've thought about this over and over. I've thought about the risks. I'm doing this deal. And not only am I doing this deal, but I'm putting my life savings into this company, and I'm going all in. And I was like,
you doubled down.
The train is rolling. I love all of you, and I hope you all get on this train with me. and it was that. I was like, that was my Dr. Workman spiel right there. Decisions made, we're going. And then we started the company. I was the second person in. We started a company called Elite Dental Partners based out of Chicago. I was the second person in, one of the founding partners. And I had this moment, excuse my language. I was like, wow, I know how to do deals. And I felt like I thought about everything except for, how do you get the first doctor in? How do you get somebody to be the first doctor in? And then I got terrified. I was terrified when I asked myself that question. And unfortunately, I asked myself that question too late. So then I was already in. And so I would say, luckily, I had enough contacts, and my partners, we all had enough contacts. We were able to find, I think we did 5 deals. We got 5 deals done before June of 2015. So we were off to the races. The snowball was officially moving. And we ended our first year of 2015 with, I think it was 20 locations. And we did all of this without ever having a website. We were laying low. We were not broadcasting to the world. We really wanted to get to a certain point before we started marketing heavily to the public.
Yeah.
So we didn't do any trade shows. We didn't do anything. As a matter of fact, I'll never forget. I went to a lab, a CE course in Peoria, Illinois. It was there's a big lab there and they were putting on a CE event, and my partner and I, we had a table, but we didn't have a logo, we didn't have business cards, we didn't have anything. We just had an empty table. And so we were like, what are we going to do? We don't have any marketing material. And as it turns out, that was probably the greatest thing that could have happened, because everybody in that entire place came up to us and were like, what are you guys? Who are you guys? What do you do? And that gave us an opportunity to give them the pitch and tell them who we were.
What happened with that company? When did you part ways with them?
Yeah. So the story of Elite. So anyway, we, fast forward 4 years, 2018, I had helped build a development team. We had about four development guys underneath me. And then we acquired, I think it was 110 locations in 10 different states. All of the deals were very, very successful practices. So $1 million plus practices, 20% plus EBITDA margins, very, very good. And then we also had, and this was one of the things that was kind of crazy, is we had one of the biggest structures in the industry at the time. So we were holding back 30 to 40% of their money over a period of 3 to 4 years, as where like a Heartland, when I was at Heartland, we were doing 2-year deals with 20% held back. So but our whole pitch was, look, we're holding more money back because there's more risk, because we're willing to give you more flexibility. We're the company with ultimate flexibility, but to have that flexibility, we have to have protections on our end. So you have to be willing to hold back a little bit more money over a few more years. And if you're willing to do that, then you get ultimate flexibility and a really, really good price. And so people were willing to do that instead of going to a company like Heartland where they had less flexibility and had to change a lot of things they were doing. So in 2018, we ended up selling that company to a private equity company called Cressy, and we sold for about a 14x multiple, little over $200 million. So in a 4-year run, we built a $200 million plus company.
That's absolutely crazy. And that's when you started your company now, correct?
Actually, no. There's actually been a lot of time in between then and what I'm doing now. But what happened was, and this is a big learning experience. So Elite, when we sold, they uncovered first of all, I don't know if you're familiar with private equity companies. They usually leverage debt. Okay. I'm going to give you the 30,000 foot view on this. They leverage debt. So they use other people's money to make money, essentially, even though they have a big pool of their own money. And so they entered into a new credit agreement with a new bank. And just for example purposes, let's say that for every dollar of cash, we were allowed $4 of debt. Okay, that's not exact, but I'm just giving you an easy example here. When we made that turn, we found out that our credentialing department was not crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's. And so when we realized that, we found out that, oh man, this is a major mistake. And we had to write off about $1 million worth of EBITDA. Now, Gary, on a $200 million company, $1 million of EBITDA does not take a company down. Okay. As a matter of fact, it doesn't even make you, we weren't even in a situation where money was a problem. It was just more of a thorn in our side from a financial standpoint. But what it did do is it threw us in breach of contract with our credit agreement. And so then, the wheels started falling off the bus because development was shut down immediately until this problem got solved. And then they found out that there were some other errors going on internally from an administrative standpoint. They had to write off even more money. So that credit agreement kept getting breached more and more. And so then COVID happened. And when COVID happened, the bank was like, okay, we're taking this thing over. So they literally took over Elite, and everybody who had money in it lost their money. So I made a lot of money when we sold to Cressy, but we also took a portion of that money and reinvested. And everybody who reinvested lost it all. Nice. So me personally, I lost about $500,000. Other people lost more. Some doctors lost more than that. But I think in general, the net positive was still very high. It was much higher than the loss. So I can't say, hey, this was a terrible experience. Lesson learned. I did not know that was something that could happen. So then I decided, okay, I'm getting the heck out of here, and end up leaving Elite. I was going to build this business that I'm working on now, and I had to sit the bench for a year. Right at the year mark, after sitting the bench, I get a call from a small DSO out of Chicago, and they said, hey, we want you to be our chief development officer, or we want you to lead our development team. We've butted into you several times here. We know who you are. We have 25 locations. And I was like, guys, look, been there, done that. I've already been on that stage twice. I don't really want to do it. I'm passionate about my business. And I don't know if this really makes a lot of sense for me, but I ended up talking to them. I ended up really liking the executive team. I ended up really liking the private equity company. So I jumped back in and was fooled. I was actually completely fooled by these guys because, they had these high expectations for acquisitions. And as soon as I get in, they're like, well, wait a minute, we're not ready to buy practices yet. We got to get from 3 million to 5 million of EBITDA. And I was like, what do you mean? I didn't come here for that. So I ended up sticking around with this company for about, I think it was probably 7 or 8 months. And then I ended up getting out and starting this business here. And now,
so your business now, just to frame this up for the audience, and this is how we ended up initially meeting, is it's sell to a DSO, correct? That's the name of the company. Okay.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit. I want to know. Tell me about like what the value that you bring to the people that you work with.
Yeah. So number one thing I need to point out in all my experience on the buy side is I've worked with pretty much every major brokerage company out there. So I know how all of the traditional brokers, what their processes are, how they think about deals, what they do on deals, what their experience is, what their expertise is. I've also worked with a lot of the investment bankers that have recently jumped in, and that's important to point out because the whole time I was on the buy side, doctors were coming directly to me a lot of times. And I always thought, man, that is such a mistake. And by the way, I'm a highly trained negotiator. And when you negotiate with a DSO, we're prepared. Like DSOs are prepared. They know who they're looking for. They know how to value the practice, how to identify opportunities, strengths, weaknesses, all of it. And they do all of that before they ever sit at the table. So when they come to that deal table, they know all of your vulnerabilities completely, right? They know what you're going to say within reason. They know what they're going to say whenever you say that. and it's almost like they're showing up to a gunfight with a feather. So there's zero chance that they can negotiate on their behalf and get what they want, need, and deserve because they don't know what to negotiate. And what they think are the value drivers in a practice are not, or 9 times out of 10 are not what private equity companies see as valuable. And there's a big difference there. And so when you're going there talking about, oh, look at this huge opportunity, and private equity guys are like, we don't think that's a big opportunity. And they'll just downplay it and then say, no, the price is what it is. They don't have a chance. And
the way I think about this is that, so when you go to buy a house for the first time, right? So, or you go to sell your house. So you buy a house, it's your first house, you go to sell it and you love it. You're emotionally tied to it, right? And you invested all this money into the guest bathroom downstairs, right? Or you invested all this money into like the man cave or something that you really liked. And the real estate agent comes and is like, oh, your kitchen's not upgraded, your master bedroom's not upgraded, and because of that, it's not worth as much as you think it is. And you invested in the wrong areas because you didn't realize what the market wanted. You invested in what you emotionally wanted. Is that kind of what it's like in what you're dealing with?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, that's a very good way of putting it that will relate to a lot of people. And so sometimes, the doctors who they say, hey, I don't know what I'm doing, they will get representation. And what'll happen though is they will reach out to traditional brokers. And by the way, traditional brokers are really good at what they're good at. And their expertise is 100% helping dentists sell to another dentist. Okay. Their valuations are teed up for that type of transaction, but they are in way over their heads when it comes to doing a deal with a private equity company or DSO. And so what'll happen is the traditional broker ends up being more of a referral source, but that's it. So the broker brings the deal. DSO says, broker, you get out of the way. We're going to do our own valuation. And then that's it. And the broker really doesn't provide a lot of value, but they still charge the doctor this massive commission. And so that makes that's made a ton of people mad, which is why a lot of doctors go straight to the DSOs, right? That's what pushes them there. And then here recently, we've had an influx of investment bankers come in. Investment bankers, they are really good at speaking the language of private equity. So what they're really good at doing is driving prices up. But the problem is they have no idea. They don't know anything about dental operations. And so when you're doing a deal, these DSOs, when they're buying a practice, they need that doctor to stay on for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years or more. And it becomes a partnership. And if that deal is not structured in such a way that it's going to be a success for both parties operationally moving forward, it is a problem. And so you hear a lot of these rumblings from doctors who, I sold my practice to this DSO and it's been nothing but crap. Well, it's because they went into the deal process only thinking about economics, but they weren't thinking about operations and fit and all of those things. And so investment bankers create bidding wars to get the highest price, but they do not take in consideration at all getting the right fit, nor do they know how to create that right fit. And so that's been something I've paid attention to over the last 5 to 10 years. And when I first started, I could only name about 5, maybe 6 other major DSOs that were competitors. As of today, I have a list of somewhere around 300 DSOs nationwide. So they're getting in like crazy. And one thing about private equity that you have to know is they have to put their money to use. So when they invest in a DSO, they have to deploy that money. And so now you have 300 of them out there competing against each other, and they're like sharks. And so they're, that's why the prices are getting so high. When I used to buy practices at three times EBITDA, now those practices go for 7 times.
All right. So give me a breakdown of what you actually do for the industry. How does your company help dental offices out there? So let's just use me as an example. Say I got 5 practices and I come to you. How is your business going to help me?
Yeah, look, Gary, that's a really good question. I've put together a 15-step proprietary methodology for basically walking a doctor step by step through the transition process to a DSO specifically or a private equity company. And it's really designed to, hold their hand throughout the entire process. And really the 15 steps can be broken up into 3 segments, if you will. And I think segment 1 is one that I am probably most passionate about, because I believe that this section is completely overlooked in the dental industry as a whole. As a matter of fact, I've never really met any broker or investment advisor, transition advisor anywhere that does this segment. And I think it's the most crucial segment to have, and that is, prepping the practice for sale. So, and one of the things I didn't mention earlier, but I think it's important to bring up, is that, in my tenure in the last decade, I've worked with almost 5,000 highly successful dentists in 26 different states. I have reviewed a lot of profit and loss statements, and, sat down with a lot of doctors and their spouses and just really got to understand, what their wants, needs, and concerns are and all of that, like I said before. But one of the things that has bothered me forever is the fact that, as a negotiator, I go to the table, I'm heavily prepared. I know what questions I'm going to ask. And because of all of the interviews I've done with doctors, I pretty much know what they're going to say. However, with that being said, on the flip side, they come there and they don't have a clue what they're going to talk about. And I always start every conversation or every interview with the doctor with this question. Why am I here? What motivated you to have this meeting with me today? And you would be surprised at how many people are like, well, Brian, that's a great question. It's like, hey, that's a really, I never even really thought, well, I got your letter, or I got a phone call from somebody. And so I thought, well, heck, yeah, I'll just talk to this guy.
Is it a lot of times, is it because they want to know what their company is valued at? A lot of times they kind of jump into that. Is that where it starts?
No. So the reason, so they never tell me the exact reason. They are very surface level with that question always. But what I've come to learn over the years is really there's doctors they go through these 4 phases, and we don't really have time to discuss all the 4 phases. But the number 1 phase 1, which is where they're an owner, and they're having to wear 19 different hats in the practice. They have all this management stress. They have to be a great dentist. They have to know like 300 ADA codes, and they have to know either how to do them or, who to refer, which ones they have to refer to. And then they have to know HR, they have to know marketing, they have to know, all the state and federal regulations. They have to know insurance billing. They have to be able to negotiate with the insurance companies. They have to know, suppliers, clinical supplies, labs, just all this stuff, right? And plus they have to be a great dentist. And so what happens, and everybody has their own breaking point. Sometimes it takes somebody 30 years, 40 years to have that breaking point, but eventually everything comes to a head, right? And they have all this stress, and then there's that one thing that kind of tips them over the scale, and then they get a call from somebody like me, right? Or, or a buyer or a broker, or somebody calls them right at that right moment, and they're like, oh man, I should probably talk to this guy because, today was a disaster. I came in and my front desk girl, she quit, or she was late. And, oh, by the way, I found out that I wrote off like $3,000, this week in PPO write-offs. And oh, by the way, I just spent about $5,000 on marketing. It didn't drive one additional new patient. And then, it's just all this stuff, right, that starts bottling up. And then they're like, boom, that gets them into phase 2, which is they start considering a transition. Right. And then real quickly, I'll just give you the other other two phases. So phase 2 is they start considering a transition, which then brings up a whole bunch of other frustrations, challenges, and fears. And then once I get through that phase, then they go into phase 3, which is they have now mentally made a decision that they want to transition, which is different than considering. Now they've made up their mind. So phase 3 is they are definitely making a transition. So then they have all these questions like, who should I sell to? What are the buyers? What are my options? Blah, blah, blah. And then they get into phase 4. Phase 4 is where they have made a decision that they are selling to a DSO or a private equity company. Okay. And then that piles on a whole new set of fears, frustrations, and challenges. Right. And not to get into all of those right now, but at the end of the day, you ask, why do they take that meeting? And it's because of those things. Now, when I ask them that question, that is not the answer I get. Well, I know I should be thinking about my exit strategy. And, I've been to seminars and, you call. And so I'm just trying to learn. Well, that's not the answer, Gary. But that's what they say because we're, right now I'm peeling back an onion. But I know at the middle of that onion is a lot of pain that actually got them to pick up that phone, right? It's why DSOs exist, because doctors, they are some of the most frustrated people on the planet. They feel like they're on an island.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think? I actually just shot a video. I was creating some short content around depression in the dental industry, and it's well documented. And I've heard different things. Like obviously, it's a painful occupation, right? You get a lot of pains and high suicide rates. What's the pain? What is that source of pain and depression coming from?
Oh man, you're getting me on a passion topic here. So I actually just recently was a panelist at Becker's Dental Review, and they asked us a question. Where's private equity going in the next 10 years? And the reason I bring that up is because I feel like this industry is completely clueless as to the answer to that question. This whole seminar was based on using artificial intelligence to make doctors' lives better. And I'm sitting there laughing. I'm like, I've analyzed, almost 5,000 practices, right? And, do you know how many milling machines I have seen that are, $80,000 coat racks? And I'm sitting here thinking, they think this doctor who's already working 70 hours a week, because he has to be a dentist and he has to run his business. So he's staying extra late every single night, is all of a sudden going to find time to figure out how to do this artificial piece of intelligence. It's like, no, the guy doesn't even know how to use his iPhone because he hasn't had time to sit down and figure out how to use his iPhone all the way through. Now he can text and he can call, but I'm telling you right now, that guy cannot use his iPhone because he hasn't had time to sit down and figure it out. And the reality is, man, they really do have to wear 19 different hats, and they're entrepreneurs. And so they want to succeed. They feel like they should be further than they are, which makes them take more classes, do more seminars, jump on more podcasts. And it's this wheel they can't get off. And then they have the weight of the world on their shoulders, because at the end of the day, everybody relies on them. Their family relies on them for money. They want to send their kids off to college. They want to give their daughter their dream wedding. And by the way, they don't even get to see, they miss half their kids' lives because they're at the dental practice. So they miss basketball games, volleyball games, baseball games, all this stuff. And for me, it's like, well, yeah, no wonder why they're depressed. No wonder why it is not a dream job, honestly. And here's the big kicker. And this is why I mentioned the Becker's Dental Review and where private equity is going, because to me, the biggest problem in dentistry, 100%, is the dental schools allowing these kids to come out with $250,000 to $500,000 of debt.
Yeah, it's high.
And that right there is the number one problem, which is why DSOs exist, by the way. So it's funny, the American Dental Association, they have forever kind of been against DSOs. There's a lot of people in that association that is against DSOs, but they sponsor the dental schools. But the irony on that is the fact that the dental schools are the reason the DSOs even exist. Because how in the world is somebody with $300,000 of debt going to do the traditional method of being an associate, building their book of business, which takes a lot of time, going into a practice, build your book of business, and then start making money? No, they need to go into a situation where they make at least $200,000 a year.
Why do you think they miss that? Why do you think the ADA doesn't see that, or do they see it and just ignore it?
It's one of those things where, I think they're just blind. They're blinded to it. I don't think they realize that they are actually sponsoring the thing that's they're sponsoring the thing that's creating the thing that they hate. Yeah. And it's like, hey, seriously, the reason DSOs exist is because the traditional way of selling a practice is pretty much done, right? The traditional way was, hey, you sell to a young kid, 26, 27 years old, they take out a loan, they buy the practice. And then eventually, you walk out into the sunset. Well, the problem is what bank in their right mind is going to, loan a kid $1 million who already has $300,000 of debt and hasn't made a dollar since he got out of college yet? I mean, who's going to do that? Who's going to do that? And then why would that kid even do that? Why would that kid immediately, right out of grad school, put themselves in $1 million plus in $1 million plus of debt? It's crazy. So it's like, it's so frustrating, because to me, this is very easy to see. And when I look at these doctors, I feel sorry for them, because, they've had to take a lot of schooling. They've had to practice, some of them 20, 30, 40 years. And then they're sitting there, they want to sell this practice. And what they really want to do is sell to another dentist, but they can't, because the younger dentists have all this debt. And so then they have to go to the DSOs, and they don't know enough about the DSOs. And, what they've heard about DSOs is usually bad, because they don't hear the good stuff. They just hear the bad stuff. And so then they're scared and they don't want to do that. And it's like this roller coaster from honestly that these guys are on. And I don't know if that answers your question, but
no, it does. And then what's the road to success then? Because there is basically a lot of negatives, right? And we could spend a lot of time focusing on that. But where's the road to success for these practices where, listen, we know you have a ton of debt. We know that it's a painful career that's, leads to depression and other things. It's hard to be a dentist and to be an entrepreneur. Where's the silver lining at?
Yeah. So I think, obviously my business is, sell to a DSO. So I actually think that DSOs are the answer to these guys. What it comes down to is which DSO is right for which doctor, right? And that's the key. Every DSO is different. They all are, they're looking for different people. They're looking for different practices. Some of them appear to be the same. Some of them are really having an identity crisis out there, but, and that's confusing, because now I feel like there's so many DSO options that now the hardest thing is to figure out which one is the right fit.
What are the pros and cons that people should be looking for? Or how do I ask? Because it's like one of those things, right? Like, I don't even know what questions to ask to make sure I get to the right DSO if I've never worked with a DSO before. So how do I even begin asking the right questions?
Yeah. So It really comes down to first understanding the doctor. So the very first thing that I would do is I sit down and I just learn about them. What keeps them up at night? What are their challenges? What are their frustrations? Really getting an understanding of what's motivating them to even be at the table. And then from there, try to create kind of their ideal situation. So here's what I know is bad in their life. So then getting them to really spell out what would be ideal, right? And this is all part of that stage one that I said, I have 3 stages. Stage one is really figuring this out. Like, what is really bad in your life? What do you want to get rid of? What's keeping you up at night, and what do you ultimately want to get rid of? And then once you have that kind of spelled out, then and only then can you start talking to DSOs and hearing what they say. So it's like, hey, I've got a doctor who he has these challenges, these frustrations, these fears. What can your DSO do to alleviate that, to help with those challenges? And ultimately, what kind of value are you going to add to him? And see, a lot of DSOs, I think they don't focus on that. They don't really focus on the doctor and what really brings that doctor to the table. They're looking at it from, hey, we bring this practice in and we can grow it by 5%, 10%, whatever. And at the end of the day, that's a problem. So it's really identifying, hey, which one of these DSOs actually care about this doctor, and what are they going to do to show us that they care about this doctor? And do they have a plan? Like, okay, we've just laid out, like, here's all the emotions this guy has. How are you actually going to solve that? Because if you actually solve that, you're going to have one happy doctor who's going to tell all his friends, all her friends about their experience with this DSO.
Can a DSO really solve everything though? Or is there always going to be like, I've talked to some people who work, I won't say the name of the DSO. They were like, amazing DSO, love working with them. They helped us operationally. They got everything squared away and they've given me everything I've wanted. I love the deal that I got, but they stink at driving in new patients. And then I got other people who are like, I have all the new patients I can handle. The DSO takes care of that, but operationally we're a dumpster fire and they don't really offer a lot of support around that. Like, is there somebody who kind of provides it all, or is that not possible?
Yeah, I don't think right now, there's anybody who's hitting a home run. That's the honest truth. I think there's several of them out there that are really good, but they're not hitting a home run. And I think when you look at the landscape in the next 10 years, the people who really, because right now it's so competitive that the ones that get it right are going to end up winning deals and the other ones are going to get swallowed up. And so when I look at this, so if I was starting my own DSO tomorrow, which I'm not obviously, but if I was, I would focus solely on taking care of that doctor and like making sure we're taking care of the reasons that he or she came to the table in the first place, right? You focus a plan and build a plan, and it's going to have to be customized, right? You have to customize that plan. So the problem with a lot of DSOs is
how can you do that at scale though?
Yeah, it's pretty easy. So there are ways to standardize. I compare. You used a house analogy earlier on the interview. I'm going to give you a same analogy with using a model home builder versus a custom home builder. You can standardize your process. I actually believe in standardization, but if you use the word standardization in this industry, it's like, oh my gosh, Aspen Dental, which by the way, I'm not bashing Aspen. I think they do
it's
really
like
good.
Saying sales, right? You can't say the word sales. You can't say the word, like even marketing was a bad word for a long time. Yeah, I get it. Like you can't say anything like that. Yeah.
But I'm not promoting standardization in the way that a lot of people take standardization. So for example, I built my dream home a couple of years ago, and my house is 100% custom to what I wanted. So I don't believe there's anybody else on the planet who has a house like mine. Because there was all these things that I wanted that were just unique. But this builder had a standardized process. He had a standardized process for how we created the blueprint. He had a standardized process for how we position the house on the lot. He had a standardized process for building the foundation. All of it was standardized, but at the end of the day, the outcome was unique to me. And so the process was standardized, but what was different was the inputs, right? The inputs is what was different. So when you're a DSO and you're working with highly successful doctors who don't want to change, you can still build a really, really good standardized process. And the only variable to the equation is the inputs that the doctor gives you. So at the end, the outcome is going to be different for every single one of those doctors because they're all going to have a different plan. They're all going to have different needs, but you run them through the same standardized process so that you can measure, track, and improve every step of the way.
So right? Why doesn't anybody do that?
I feel like, it's a really good question. I will tell you that throughout my career, everybody I've ever competed against has been this highly educated, investment guy from Kellogg, right? Super smart, just incredibly smart. But people skill wise, they kind of fall short. And I feel like that's one of the reasons why I've been able to win so many deals in my career, because I can sit down with a doctor and just say, hey, what's keeping you up at night? Oh, that's important to you. So whatever I do here, I have to make sure that's taken care of. It's pretty simple, right? But the thing is, when you go into a DSO, they build these, they think they're doing the right thing by they'll have a HR department, they'll have a marketing department, they'll have a credentialing department and all these different departments, and they think they're creating this support system. But where they fail is on truly understanding why these guys are coming to the table, which is why when you talk to a DSO, a lot of them, they're eager to talk about the structures that they're offering and the prices they're offering. And to me, price and structure is like the last thing that matters. It all matters, but it's like the last thing that matters, right? I can go in with a subpar structure and an average price, but if I take care of all this doctor's needs and really take care of all the reasons why he came to the table in the first place, I'm going to win that deal 80% of the time.
How can a dentist know? Because a lot of those things are, you don't draw, like the structure and the price are fixed things, right? So it's like, here's how many years we're doing it, and here's how much money I'm giving you, and here's how it's getting paid to you. So those are all very fixed things and very easy to negotiate on, right?
Right.
But hey, I want these days off every so often to go to my kid's thing or whatever they may want. I don't even know what those things are, but whatever those are, those sound much harder to work into the deal. And also, how do I know they're actually going to do them? If I'm the doctor, how do I know the DSO is actually going to follow through with that?
Well, first of all, reputation is everything in today's world. So, if they're making deals and then going back on their deals, then they're going to stop acquiring practices. Their reputation will smoke them. But look, every deal, I subscribe to the philosophy that a deal is only a good deal if both sides are a little uncomfortable. So when you go to the table, have your dream outcome ready to go. Like, this is what I would absolutely love. This is the ideal situation. Boom. But then you have to know you're not going to get everything. It's like a marriage, right?
Yeah.
You're going to have to. I live in Robinson, Illinois. Dude, you think I want to live in Robinson, Illinois? No, I don't. I conceded. I love my wife, right? But I came, my ideal situation was to marry her and, live like in Florida on a beach somewhere. But no, I'm in Robinson, Illinois. And that's what it's like in the deal world, right? You come with your ideal situation and then you start conceding. Both sides have to concede. And that's where both sides are a little uncomfortable at the end of the day, right? Because they both had to step in. Now, you have to be prepared. You have to go to that table prepared in order to do that. And that's what I was saying earlier. These guys that come to the table and they haven't thought about what their perfect transition looks like. They haven't thought about, what number is it going to take for them to even be able to retire with what it's going to take for them to live comfortably in their retirement. They haven't mapped this stuff out. They're actually coming to the table just kind of like curiosity killed the cat. And then they end up, they start liking the guys right? Because the deal guys are pretty easy to talk to. They're nice people. And then you meet the DSOs, the executives, they're all nice people. Next thing you know, you got a deal going, but man, so much money is left on the table. And even if they get the best price, they still are not getting the best outcome on the deal, because I'm telling you right now, one of the biggest challenges DSOs have is surprises after the deal happens. So
like what? Like
surprises will happen.
Give me the top 10 or top 5 surprises that you're seeing right now that their DSOs are getting smacked with.
It's more of a surprise for the doctor. So the doctor goes in, they do the deal, and then all of a sudden, something will happen operationally, and they're like, "Oh, I didn't know that was going to happen," and they get mad. And there's so many little things like that happen. It's hard to give you a lot of examples, but it's the number one reason why people get why they will start being negative towards DSOs, and I think that at the end of the day, if you tell somebody before the deal happens that, hey, you're going to blow up Op 5, as soon as this deal closes, I'm going to blow up Op 5, and you sign off on it, Gary, then when I blow up Op 5, you and I are going to be good because you knew it was coming and we agreed on it. But if I don't tell you I'm going to blow up Op 5 and we do the deal and then I go in and I blow up Op 5, you might try to harm me, right? Like that's going to be a problem. And that's the best analogy I can give you is, they're not building out this plan of like, hey, here's things that are important to me that you cannot touch. If for me to do this deal, you cannot change these things. And if you do, I'm out. Right. And so, but they're not going to the table with those things. And so now the DSO, they don't know what those things are. So they do the deal and then those things change and then bam. And by the way, that's not on the DSO. That's on the doctor. That's on the doctor because the doctor didn't communicate his expectations or her expectations. So, both of them are at fault at the end of the day for those problems happening. So back to what I was saying. So how can a doctor really protect themselves and get themselves the best deal? Well, number one is they got to go to the table prepared. That's stage one. And that's knowing your numbers. You got to have a wall-to-wall evaluation done. The DSOs are going to look at every production report, every management report. They're going to look at all your P&Ls. They're going to have all that. And you got to be looking at it the same way they are. Otherwise, it's not a fair fight. And then you got to have a pretty good understanding of the LOI process. So what does it mean to even have an LOI? What's the process of getting to an LOI? How do you negotiate an LOI? And then even when you get to there, you have to understand that that's you're only halfway done. So now you have LOI to close, which can be 8 to 12 weeks or more, depending upon how big the deal is. And, there's a lot of stuff that goes on. That's very important, right? That's where the real due diligence happens. So you got to know, the legal documents. You got to understand.
So how much time is a dentist who's in the chair, they have 2 or 3 practices, how much time are they spending to vet something like this, to walk through this process?
Well, what happens is they don't have enough time to do it all correctly. So they'll vet 1 or 2 DSOs, maybe 3, because the DSOs ask for a lot of information and it takes a lot of time to work with one, right? And so because they don't have, and by the way, they don't save their stuff and organize their stuff so they can just pass it on to the next guy. They have to run that process every single time with each DSO. And so they can only get through 2 or 3 and then they make their decision. Well, the truth is you need to be vetting. If there's 20 DSOs in your market, you need to vet all 20. Process of elimination, man. You got to talk to every single one of them and then have a legit reason to cancel them out.
Because everything in business that I've ever learned, almost everything has been about either who I know or the amount of reps that I get, right? So if I know the right person that's gotten the reps, then that takes me super far. But if not, then I have to go get reps. And so I actually get this question a lot. Gary, how do you hire for a position that you don't know anything about? Go interview a bunch of people, right? Go and get 10 or 20 people and ask them questions. And you'll quickly realize, oh, this person was on the higher end of the caliber. This person was in the middle caliber. This person was lower. And so it sounds like just going through that process with the DSOs, you're gonna be able to figure it out, even if you're not the sharpest knife in the drawer, because you're going to be able to stack them up against each other.
Yeah. And look, at the end of the day, you really got to figure out who's going to be a good fit and know how to, and you got to know what questions to ask. in the right order. There's an old saying in business, you don't pay the plumber to bang on pipes. You pay the plumber because he knows where to bang on the pipes. So the questions you ask and in the order you ask them is very important. A lot of times doctors, they'll be early in the process and they'll start asking, how do you guys process your payroll? It's like, look, man, we have so many bigger questions to answer before we get to that. But that's the kind of questions that they ask because they don't know what bigger questions to ask and how to do it. And that's really important. And then also, what questions to ask different people in the company. So if you're talking to a development guy, you might have a series of questions. If you're talking to the HR person, you might have a whole new series of questions. If you're talking to the CEO, you may have even more, even different questions. So it's really important to have all of that laid out and also take notes. By the way, I've never met a doctor that's taken notes. So he has all these meetings with these DSOs and all these calls and all this stuff. And not once have they taken a note, not a single note. I had one doctor in my entire career take notes, and I'm telling you, that guy was fishing for information. He was not a legitimate buyer.
Yeah.
And the whole time he was taking notes, I was like, this guy, this is not right.
This isn't normal.
This is not normal. Funny. So that's really important. And then, that LOI to close process, you gotta, knowing how to work with attorneys so that they don't, take all your money, and then knowing how to, manage landlords get involved, and you got to understand how to manage those relationships. And then once that deal closes, it's not over, right? So now you have the post-transition plan and really having a good understanding of what that's going to look like. What's the next 90 days going to look like? And, how are we going to do this together so that we're starting this relationship off on the right foot? I feel like that's hardly ever ironed out correctly or communicated at a high level. So there's always a lot of surprises there, I feel. And it's all really important. And by the way, this is a full-time job. I've been doing this over a decade, and I learned something new on every single deal, right? So for a dentist to try to run a business, manage, wear 19 different hats, and then try to run an M&A function is very difficult. And so they really, it's so such a disadvantage for them to try this on their own.
Okay, so it is super hard. So if someone wants to reach out to you and ask questions around this stuff, how what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, I would say LinkedIn right now is the number one way to get a hold of me. LinkedIn right now, I have just basically started my business as of like the last few months, and building a website is coming soon. So LinkedIn is the number one place to get a hold of me. But I've worked with enough people that a lot of people probably already have.
Is it just Brian Mans with an S? BRIANMANS? Is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
Awesome, on LinkedIn. And then what is email? Is there an email a good way to get a hold of you too, or just LinkedIn's best?
Yeah, they can email me at brian@brianmans.com, or even call me on my cell, which that's 618-554-8042.
This has been really, really informative. I honestly, we could have filmed for 3 hours. This was an hour-long podcast. Just so the audience knows, I scheduled like 40 minutes. I was like 45 minutes. I was 5 minutes late. Running another meeting ran over. And so we filmed 35 minutes. And then I was just like, hey, we got to come back, film for another 30 minutes. Honestly, I could have taken you down a million different roads and filmed for several more hours. So Brian, if you're okay with it, I definitely think that this is a conversation that we should continue to have. And I would love to pick your brain more about what you're doing in the future.
Absolutely, Gary. It's been a pleasure being on here. Thanks for having me, and talk to you anytime.
Thanks so much.